Okay. Uh, it's my pleasure to stop my chat. That's not the pleasure, but the pleasure is introducing Richard Harrison. He's an ELT author, publisher, and teacher trainer based in Muscat and London. He's worked extensively throughout the Middle East region for more than 25 years. He's the founder of Canford Publishing, and his many ELT publications include Framework, Academic Writing and Critical Thinking, the Keep Writing series, and Better Writing. I give you Mr. Richard Harrison.
Right, well, thank you very much, Anne. Very nice chatting to you, and thank you for that nice introduction. I'll try and share my screen now. Right, okay then. So I'm going to be talking about introducing critical thinking into a language program. And I'll be looking at three different approaches to this, three different ways that we can go about introducing critical thinking. Let me start off by just saying a few words about critical thinking. What is it? Well, it's one of the 21st century skills, and I'll be talking a little bit more about those later on. These are the skills that are needed in the age of the internet, the generally accepted skills that are needed in the age of the internet. Critical thinking is a type of thinking. So it's alongside everyday thinking, scientific thinking, creative thinking, and abstract thinking, and so on. Everyday thinking is the normal kind of thinking that we engage in throughout the day when random thoughts drift into our head. But critical thinking is not like that at all. It's not random. It's very conscious thinking. It's voluntary, not involuntary. And it's reflective, which means it's deep thinking over a period of time. And it's also reasonable. It's based on reason. Another thing to say about it is that it's an integral part of academic life, which is surprising. It surprises me that it's not taught very often explicitly. It's an integral part. So everything that a student does at university or college involves critical thinking, whether it's writing an essay or reading a textbook, analyzing data, taking part in a discussion, and so on. And the final thing to say about critical thinking is that it encourages skepticism and doubt. Now, these are not negative things. It's not the same as being cynical and negative about the world. They're positive things because they lead to asking questions. And asking questions is really the core of critical thinking. And it's asking questions, not just factual questions, but questions that are perhaps difficult or probing or searching, delicate, awkward, and so on, even inconvenient questions. And a lot of these might be what we call higher order questions. So this is something that we need to encourage, I feel, in our students. The ability to ask questions and sometimes ask difficult questions. And if we go back through history, this is the way that knowledge has accumulated throughout all of these different spheres, navigation, astronomy, medicine, and so on, by people asking questions, challenging the conventional wisdom, which is really the opposite of critical thinking, when you accept the conventional wisdom, and sometimes doing that, risking being ridiculed, or even worse, by asking these questions. Right, so let's get on to the main part of the talk. How can we introduce critical thinking into our programs? And for critical thinking, I like to use this image of a diamond. We all know what a diamond is like. It's clear, it's precise, it's sharp, it's incisive, and it's even sparkling. So this is the kind of thinking that we want to encourage in our students, and ourselves for that matter, as opposed to what we do a lot of the time, which is rather, and I use this image of a cloud or a cotton wool ball, thinking that is woolly or muddled or unfocused or sloppy or lazy. And this, I'm afraid, is what we do a lot of the time. So how do we train our students to get from the, the muddled thinking to the clear and precise and sharp thinking? So I'm recommending 3 approaches here. The first one is to get students to think about their thinking, which is metacognition. I'll go back into this in a moment. The second one is to introduce a critical thinking syllabus alongside your existing syllabus in the foundation program or wherever. And I'll be looking at that in detail. And then the third approach is a more flexible approach, which is to introduce critical thinking activities into the language classroom. And these, I say flexible because they can be 5 or 10 or 20 minutes, and they can be scattered into the program at convenient intervals. Or you can use a combination of all 3 approaches, which I would recommend. So let's go back to the first approach, thinking about thinking. And getting students to think about their own thinking is really like asking them to step outside their bodies and look at themselves objectively. And to think, to notice the way that they learn, for example, or perform a task. To know what they are good at and what they need to improve. And plan what they need to do in order to complete a task or solve a problem. So we should encourage this kind of thinking, getting students to step aside and to look at themselves objectively. How do we do that? Well, I think we can do it through a number of tasks, and I'm just going to give you one example of a task. Think about a big decision you had to make recently. For example, a new job, a new home, ending a friendship or a relationship, etc. And what I've done is I've come up with a kind of worksheet for people to use, not so much to fill in, but to use as the basis for a discussion between 2 or 3 people, a kind of structured discussion. So what issue did you need to decide about? What steps did you go through before you made your decision? Assuming they made steps and they didn't just go with a gut feeling. How could you improve your decision-making process? So I think we can come up with a number of tasks like this, looking at decision-making, problem-solving, study skills, and so on. Right, let's move on to the next one, which is the critical thinking syllabus approach. This is getting a syllabus alongside your existing syllabus. I think of critical thinking as a number of sub-skills, a kind of bundle of skills, rather like reading or writing or listening or speaking. They're not just one skill, they are a bundle of sub-skills. And so critical thinking, I believe, is the same. So I've tried to break down these sub-skills, and these are the elements of the course. So first of all, under the heading of arguments and opinions, building a strong argument, looking at both sides of an argument, supporting an opinion with examples, evidence, reasons, and sources. When I was working at the German university in Muscat, my students were full of opinions, but unfortunately they relied very much on emotion and exaggeration to make their point. They weren't so good at giving evidence or reasons or concrete examples or quoting sources. So this is some training that students need. Another point, I think, is defining terms. If we're going to have a discussion or an argument about poverty or stereotypes or democracy or whatever, we need to have a clear idea in our own minds of what exactly we mean by these terms. And that actually helps us in our thinking. It helps us in our putting over our point of view. So, for example, for poverty, we could take the United Nations definition of poverty, which is an income of $2 a day or less. That's extreme poverty, that's their definition. And so on with stereotypes and so on. Right, data. So commenting on data, asking questions about data. So when a piece of data is put in front of us, we need to be able to question it. You know, where did this data come from? How was it collected? And so on. Linking cause and effect and avoiding false correlations. Now we know that just because two things happen at the same time doesn't mean to say there's a causal relationship between those two elements. Now then, going on to problem solutions, identifying and defining a problem, finding solutions to the problem, using criteria to make a choice. So, for example, if the problem was that you needed to replace your car, you might come up with a list of criteria for what you need for the, or how you're going to decide on a new car. So is it the price? Is it the reliability? Is it the make? Is it the color? Is it the safety record? And so on. And then you would put those criteria in order of importance, helping you to make an intelligent decision. Now, some other critical thinking skills, identifying groups and classifying. So taking items and finding what they have in common between them and then putting them into groups is in fact an important critical thinking skill. And I mentioned the 21st century skills, the 12 skills, which are normally put into these three different categories, as you can see in the diagram here. And some more, analyzing a process. So if we take a complex process like the production of tea, going from the picking of the leaves to the production of the tea bag or the packet of tea, then we can break it down into a series of steps. So this is an example of critical thinking, be able to break down a process, to analyze a process and break it down into a series of steps, which makes it easier to understand and also easier to explain. Similarly, with a procedure like sending a parcel. If you want to send a parcel from Kuwait to Australia, for example, a registered parcel, what is the procedure? What are the steps involved? And then some more distinguishing fact and opinion. So obviously newspaper articles are a good source of this, editorials and newspapers, and thinking about thinking we've already mentioned. Okay, so those are a number of critical thinking sub-skills. How do we put this into a syllabus? Well, I'm giving you an example from my book framework. I had a syllabus or a critical thinking component alongside the other components of the course. So alongside the language focus and the writing skills. And there are the critical thinking sub-skills. You might want to design your own critical thinking program and then similarly put that in alongside the other elements of your foundation program or whatever. Right, let's come on to the third approach I'm recommending, critical thinking classroom activities. And I've got a number of these. I'm sure you're familiar with most of them. But what I've done here, on the right, I put the critical thinking skills that these activities are practicing. So puzzles, for example, and there are a lot of puzzles available on the internet that you can use in the class. They train the brain. And jumbled texts, which I like very much, are a kind of linguistic puzzle. And I would say these train the linguistic brain. And then brainstorming, creative thinking. Class debates, a very good way of getting students in teams to build strong arguments and then to conduct a debate. Self-reflection, we've already done. And here are some more activities and the skills. The ones in blue, scam emails, advertisements, misleading data, and scientific experiments, I'm going to look at in a little bit more detail now to give you some examples. Let's start with scam emails, okay? Now, I'm sure, you know, like me, you probably get a lot of these and you look at them and you're a bit annoyed, maybe not as annoyed as this, but you get annoyed and you just delete them. You decide they're not genuine. But then I started to think, well, wait a minute, let's turn this around. Why not turn the tables on those people sending scam emails and actually make use of them? Because when you make that decision to delete a scam email, that's actually critical thinking in process. You've made the judgment, this is not a genuine email. Let's have a look at this one, for example. This is supposed to come from PayPal. And I've highlighted in red the elements that aroused my suspicion. So first of all, they don't use my name, they just say, "Dear customer." There's no reference to my account or my account number. And then there's some strange language here. Alert activity, and then we need to confirmation. And you start to think, well, wait a minute, would a big company like PayPal send out emails that are grammatically incorrect? And then a couple of articles are missing as well. So what do they want you to do? Well, in this case, they wanted me to click on the links, and I decided, no, I wasn't going to do that. How can we make use of this with our students? Well, I've come up with a worksheet that could be used with almost any email, but you might want to tailor them for specific emails. But this is a general one. So what does the sender want you to do? They want you to click on a link, or they want you to reply, or they want you to send bank details, or they want you to send money. Why are you suspicious? Well, I was suspicious, as I've said, because it was a general greeting. There were grammatical mistakes. It didn't look very professional. They didn't use an email address that looked as though it was PayPal. So there were a number of reasons. And if you compare that with a genuine PayPal email, then it obviously looks a lot more professional. They addressed me by my name at the top there, and they had an email address that looked as though it came from PayPal. Here's one more example. This one, well, this is a sort of too good to be true offer. And I think we generally know that if something looks as though it's too good to be true, then it usually is, unfortunately. Why was I suspicious? Well, this is actually a genuine company. I looked up their address and the website, but this person is using his own private address. And again, a generic greeting, hello. And as you start to read on, it really does look it's too good to be true. Some strange language during the eastern city of Benghazi insurgency doesn't sound quite right. If you've got sharp eyes, you'll notice that there's a mistake in the punctuation, in the number. There should be a comma there. And you think, well, a financial advisor shouldn't make mistakes like that. Anyway, it's a very kind offer. He needs me to stand as the next of kin to get all this money and so on. So I decided to delete this and not to reply. So that's what he wanted. He wanted a reply. Right, okay. So there's a lot of scope there. There's a lot of fun to be had out of these scam emails, as well as making some points about critical thinking. Let's go on to analyzing advertisements. And why advertisements? Well, we can say about advertisements that they're kind of opposite of what we're trying to do in the academic world. Advertisements are subjective, they're full of emotion and exaggeration, like the picture you see before you there of the healthy looking burger. Often they have misleading claims, they're not very strong on evidence, sometimes they're not truthful at all. So as I say, this is the opposite of what we're trying to do in the academic world, where we're trying to teach students to be objective and to rely on evidence and to be truthful. Now, you can also have a lot of fun with these advertisements. Here's an example, and I mean, we were expected to believe that the person on the left, we're expected to believe that the person on the left is the same as the person on the right. So how can we exploit something like this? What claim is the advertiser making about the product? So another worksheet here. Well, the claim is that this cream will improve your skin. Think of 3 critical questions you could ask the advertisers. So again, this worksheet can be used with any advertisement. In that case, you might want to say, well, is it really the same person? Where are the test results? How many days did they have to apply the cream for? And so on and so forth. Now, here's another one, rather an old advertisement. I don't think these are allowed anymore. The implication here is that because a doctor is recommending these, that they are healthy. They protect your throat, he's saying, against a cough. Here's another one, more up to date, an anti-coronavirus mattress, which I haven't heard of before, corona resistant. So again, that's the claim that this mattress is resistant to corona. So again, it provokes lots of questions. And let's remember, this is the heart of critical thinking. This is what we want to get back to, getting students to ask questions, difficult, awkward questions. So what are they saying? Are they trying to, do they have evidence for this? What do scientists say? What do specialists in coronavirus say about this mattress? And so on. Sales advertisements are a very good source for critical thinking. When you see up to, that triggers a warning, because when it says up to, it means most of the offers will not be 50%, they'll be less than 50%, maybe 10% or 20%, and so on. And here's one that brings in a kind of ethical question. This is BIC that's basically saying that pens make cheating even more comfortable because their pens can write on hands. All right, it's a joke. We know it's a joke, but do you really want to give students the idea that they can write on the palm of their hands with equations and so on? So there are ethical questions that come up as well with advertisements. Right, let's go on to misleading data. I think I've still got time. I'll just go through this quickly. So by misleading, I mean data that is inaccurate or incomplete, or it's cherry-picked, meaning that the presenter is taking the best bits of data which support his or her opinion or point of view and ignoring the other data. And let me give you an example. This one is from COVID data, unfortunately, but on the other hand, there's a lot of data around related to COVID. So it's a very rich source if you want to exploit it in the classroom. So this is cases of COVID by country. And you can see from this, the United States at the top of the list, not doing very well. And Austria, for example, down at the bottom. But I think this is an example of not comparing like with like, which is very important to do when we're looking at data, because countries obviously are different sizes. They're different sizes physically and in terms of population. So maybe a better way of comparing countries would be to do this: reported cases per million inhabitants. And then we find the United States still not doing very well, but Austria is slightly worse than the United States. By the way, this data is from August 2020, so it's a little bit out of date and things have changed since then, but it's just to make the point. So how can we exploit this? What does the data show? What possible problems are there with this data? Again, this can be used for any graph or bar chart or pie chart or whatever. Here's another example. This is taking things out of context, which is a kind of way of cherry picking. These are COVID deaths in the UK in September, October, and November of 2020. But they don't really tell us very much without looking at the bigger picture. And we really need to have the full context in order to understand what is going on. This can be used in a kind of devious way. If we look at this salesman again, and he's got his sales figures for LPs in the UK for the last 6 months of the year. And things look to be quite good. You know, the sales are going up during the last 6 months. So he probably just wants to focus on that. If you look at the whole year, though, it's a rather different picture. And the first half of the year showed a very steep decline. So this is something that students should be made aware of, that it is possible to take bits of data out of context to make the point that you want to. And that's really rather dishonest. Finally, the scientific method, which is the heart of science, and it's very important to critical thinking. It's a kind of formalization of critical thinking, going through a number of different steps in order to test a hypothesis. And I think you're all familiar with the cycle. You observe, you question, and then you come up with a hypothesis. You carry out an experiment, and then you come to a conclusion based on the results of your experiment. So this is a very good practice for students in critical thinking. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to do something like this in the classroom, but what you can do is to get them to discuss what steps they would go through, how they would approach an experiment. Let's just give you one example. Do mice grow larger if they are given vitamin C? Okay, and so what kind of experiment would you carry out in order to test this theory? Or to answer this question rather. So you gather information, make a hypothesis, and the students might come up with an answer, something like this. So they would learn about mice, they would learn about vitamin C, And then they would have an experiment with 2 groups of mice. One have a tasty meal for mice, and the other one would have a tasty meal with vitamin C as well.
Mr. Harrison, I'm sorry that we need to end the session in just about a half a minute. So
Okay.
Stay on schedule. This has been fascinating. I wish I could just say, keep going.
Okay, well, don't worry. I think I can wrap up in 30 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, let's try. Okay, so I'll just go on to the conclusion. Critical thinking can and should be taught explicitly, I believe, particularly in the foundation program or in schools. And I've listed the 3 approaches that I recommend. I'd just finally like to say some of the books I've referred to that I've written on this. Framework First, Introducing Academic Writing and Critical Thinking, and Framework at the higher level. And they come along with teachers' guides and so on. If you'd like more information, please go to my website, and I've got some videos on the YouTube channel, the Canford Publishing YouTube channel. And if you have any questions that I can't answer now because I've run out of time, maybe you'd like to send me an email to one of these addresses. So thank you for your attention, and I'm sorry, Anne, for running out of time.
It was fascinating. In fact, I'm hoping that in the coming year that you will actually join us to present a webinar.
Okay, that would be lovely. I would like to do that.
Yeah. Thank you again. We will, for those of you who are staying for Huda Hussein's presentation, you can just stay on here. You don't have to log out because she will be on at this link. Again, thank you so much, Mr. Harrison. It was nice meeting you virtually and hope to meet you in person, inshallah.
Right, yes, me too. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Okay, then. Bye-bye. Bye.